So campus is very well mapped because I work near there. So you can see I've got in different icons there for the trees. So there's like a mixed woodland icon and there's conifer icons and things. So that's one little itch I've managed to scratch with this slippy map. But it's also got a few other features. So I've done a little test here of sort of what kind of detail you could potentially add into OpenStreetMap, and we can maybe discuss what should and shouldn't go into OpenStreetMap later. But here I've done a little test where I've added in some places where there's invasive species along the water of leaf. So I've got little icons there which sort of symbolise the different sort of species. I don't know if people know very much about invasive species, but they're kind of troublesome sometimes. They're very expensive to manage, and they cause decline in biodiversity, and they can cause along riverbanks. They can sort of increase erosion, and that can cause flooding. They have all sorts of sort of negative effects. Although some of them do look very pretty, so it's a bit of a shame when you have to get rid of them. But so I've got a little key here which I've made up, and these are the sort of basic things this map highlights. So I've done my broadleaf and coniferous woodlands, and then those are the plants which this map highlights from the information in the database. So there's Himalayan balsam and Japanese knotweed, and they're the sort of big invasive species which people are always looking to manage. So that's the sort of site as it is. It's fairly basic, but it's a sort of just a start into maybe what could be done with natural features and what sort of things could go into the database. I'm going to go flick back to my presentation because I can't remember what I'm doing next. So yeah, okay. So the tagging, how do you actually go about mapping these features, and what sort of tags should be used for mapping these habitats and natural features? So I kind of, when I started to look into this, I kind of realised it's a little bit chaotic at the moment. A lot of the things haven't been defined, and there's a lot of people doing sort of different things. So the basic one, if you're interested in mapping the environment, is if you go to environmental OSM page on the wiki, and I've kind of improved this page a bit just to cover the sort of basics of all the sort of different things you could map which are sort of related to the environment. And I sort of just tidied it up a bit. So there's all sorts of things you can add on, and descriptions of all the tags. So renewable energy and land use. Things like, there's quite interesting one which I would like to add. Added onto my map is environmental monitoring stations. So you'll sort of see them occasionally on roadsides as sort of for monitoring air pollution. You can also put in river gauges and that sort of thing. I'd quite like to add that onto my site and maybe make them interactive, so you can kind of click on them and and that'll link to the website, and you can get the latest air pollution statistics from that particular site, or get the latest river level from another site, sort of thing. So that's quite an interesting one. If you're out and about mapping, make sure you note down environmental monitoring stations.
And then the data from them is published on the web somewhere, is that correct?
Yeah, some of them are, some of them aren't. So I know for instance you can get the river gauges, flooding sort of things, you can get that online in sort of close to real time. Some of the air pollution you can get real time, but things, we were talking yesterday about rain gauges can't necessarily get hold of that information, but I'll just have to see what I can get.
Is that on the SEPA website, or is that?
Yeah, I think the air pollution, I'm not quite sure where that's published. I'm not sure who's in charge of that, but I'm pretty sure there's a website for it. The flooding one's SEPA, or I guess the Environment Agency down south. And yeah, I trying to think what other sort of monitoring stations. There's a whole sort of list of them on here. So I'll just have a quick look, see what's available. So I mean, it's probably not so relevant, but there's like people have set up a category there for seismic activity and noise and stuff. So there'll be a host of different people involved in those, but it'd be a nice little kind of feature to have, I think. So that's where to head if you want to know what to sort of record. More specifically, this is what I've sort of started to use, and I wrote a page on taxon, and it's sort of time for a bit of a biology lesson. Is that there's a lot of tags getting used at the moment, particularly on trees, and I noticed actually there's something like over 700,000 trees in the OpenStreetMap database, so individual spots of trees. So there's a lot of activity going on, and a lot of those trees actually have species names attached, and they have height and width measurements on some of them. I think some of them are imports from sort of council data and things like that. So there's getting to be quite a lot of data out there. It's kind of an interesting data source. But yeah, so I've kind of there's a lot of enthusiasm, but it's kind of interesting. Like the species tag gets used a lot, but doesn't necessarily equal a species. So if you say, I've given an example there, like species equals oak. Well, oak's not a species; it's a sort of a genus, or it covers a lot of different species. So there's lots of different types of oak. And then other people have used like genus and biological name, and it's kind of getting a little bit muddy. So I didn't propose it, but somebody else proposed this using taxon to cover any biological level. So a taxon is just any taxonomic level from species to sort of family or whatever. So you can, and I've sort of worked on it a little bit just to sort of show you what sort of terminology you use. So there's, the basic one is just taxon, but you might want like taxon English or all the rest of it. So there's lots of information there. If you do want to tag, a particular tree in your garden, you can now do it, and hopefully if you follow these rules, you'll be okay. So at the moment there's only about 180 things using taxon, but there's like thousands using species. I mean, it doesn't really matter too much, but you can be correct. Use this one. I suppose.
Would you find that maybe people would use species equals oak if they're out and they see an oak tree, and then maybe somebody would actually say, well, actually, it's not the species. It's not actually a species in the scientific word. It's that species in the general English.
Yeah.
And so that's where you would use this taxon to maybe correct them and say, well, actually, it's the genus of oak. And then somebody might add what the actual scientific species is.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You can use
Oh.
whatever tags you want, and I'm happy with that. But just you can certainly get into more detail with it if you wanted to. Yeah, so I wouldn't, I don't object to anyone using whatever tags, but yeah, it means someone can come along later and add more detail in. I think it's interesting. That's something to think about with habitat mapping. It gets pretty detailed in species and things. But you want to encourage people to map whatever level they can map, and if they're adding useful information, then that's great. So, but then having maybe another level for people who can do a little bit more and so on. So having these tags available so people can use them once they get if they're in that sort of field and maybe know a little bit more about certain things. So So anyway, I made an attempt there to sort of start to work towards sort of tightening up some of the sort of help pages and wiki. I mean this was a kind of another one which is sort of interesting. Was this is what I've been using to generate the kind of mixed woodlands and the coniferous woodland sort of icon. on the rendering. So I've just sort of like type of woodland and coniferous deciduous, and but originally that was something like what was it? Yeah, actually that's still wrong, that one. I just noticed. I think I must be on a different page. But you see that like you can have both the tree which is coniferous and deciduous. They're not exclusive, and sort of that surprises probably some people. But something like the Japanese larch is a coniferous tree. It's also deciduous. So we really want broadleaf and coniferous. So it's like little things like this which have crept in, which aren't kind of actually kind of biologically kind of useful. I don't know, that it's just the wrong terminology. So for some reason I think it's maybe in forest. I've changed it. But yeah, this kind of so it's sort of ongoing at the moment. So yeah, that one has got. That's one I would probably use as type coniferous broadleaf palm mixed. That's the other thing to mention is a lot of them are European sort of centric habitats and natural features and land uses. There's probably a whole load of things which we don't cover in terms of like how to map tropical rainforest or like mango swamp. I'm not sure if there's a sort of a tag for that kind of thing. So that's maybe something to build on in the future, is kind of making it a bit more global. So that's a bit more about the tags. I don't know if anyone's got any questions or if they've attempted to sort of do any land use or habitat mapping.
So you've rendered the tiles, your own tile set in your own custom rendering, and they're on that website, and you're now capturing the data also onto that website, or are you pushing that back into the OpenStreetMap?
Yeah. So
So your Slippy map background is coming from from your website, but the data is now on OSM.
Yeah. So and it's not like live. So I'm not rendering. If you change OpenStreetMap, that won't update until I get around to updating it.
Sure.
So it's
sure.
But I mean, that's something maybe to think about in the future. Is like I'd quite like to add like an editing thing to it.
Oh right. Okay.
I think at the start I'll just do it so you click edit and it'll jump you to the OpenStreetMap site and open the editor, because that's kind of quite easy to install. But maybe think about like a custom editor, so and there'll be a selection of things, features which are relevant to habitat mapping. So maybe like a list of invasive species and like the various different land uses, just to make it a bit quicker and easier. So this was, I mean, kind of inspired by talking to there's various trusts and local organisations doing a lot of invasive species monitoring and treatment and management, and they're sort of struggling with that whole side of how do you manage it. You've got to walk a whole catchment, you've got loads of different patches. Where do you start treating it? Do you go upstream? Do you start downstream ends? All this sort of. So it's a really massive job and really sort of technical, and there's lots of landowners, and you've got to sort of get it really well organised. So hopefully something like OpenStreetMap would be a useful tool for them all to work from and sort of share information. But that's.
So there's the issue of, does it make sense to put invasive species into OpenStreetMap? Are they kind of permanent enough and obvious enough to include?
Yeah. That's sort of something
I don't know.
To talk about. But I suppose people. People do. Well, I put them in, but also, people put trees and all sorts of things in.
Yeah, so they're not really any different from a tree.
No,
just another.
Yeah, just another plant. I think I would be like, I am still pretty cautious about it, sort of testing it out, and I think. But I think if you're involved with a group who are actually going out and monitoring it and updating it and changing it, then that's quite good. But if you just see something in a woodland somewhere and you put it on, it's probably not that useful, because you're not going to go back there and nobody's going to be there to sort of curate the data.
I guess one of the problem is if I don't know exactly, I see that it's a magnificent tree, but I'm not fairly sure what it is. Will it be helpful on just taking a note and and taking a picture of some leaves or some fruits or something like that, and submit that as a in addition to the location. Because as a non-expert, I wouldn't be able to do more.
Yeah, I go, it's a tree. For flowers, I go, it's a rose or it's not a rose.
Yeah.
I could do that, but
yeah, but I mean, like the whole point of could you know that someone else would look at it again and that might
there's a website called iSpot which does that.
Oh, okay.
It's worth checking out if you're ever stuck. iSpots, yeah, .org probably. And you can upload photos to that, and somebody will come along with an idea and tell you what it is as far as they can from a photograph.
There's also a group on Flickr. What plant is that? So you just post any photos of the flowers or leaves, and
so
they
I think
ID quickly.
They do that. I mean, it's a really interesting site. It's well worth having a look, and they have actually some of their data they've uploaded to this site called the National Biodiversity Network, which is a site for collecting species information. But at the same time, they're a little bit reticent to do it because the identification is just based on a photograph, and it's not always accurate, and they're never quite sure of the exact location. Maybe it's been taken, and so there's some things they have uploaded onto this sort of this NBN gateway, which is a sort of depository, but they really want sort of really high quality records, and again, sort of all this sort of species information which is starting to come onto OpenStreetMap, whether it's of a good enough level is a question. But I think for certain applications, I think this could be it's good in certain areas, but I wouldn't sort of use it as an overall place to put biodiversity information sort of thing. So I think for some applications it's good, for other things there's probably other tools which are better. So yeah, I think what OpenStreetMap does is you can have areas, whereas at the moment the NBN Gateway just has points. So if you want to manage, for instance, invasive species, you need to know how much of it is there, not just kind of where it is, but so there's certain advantages. But maybe somebody else will come up with probably a better system at some point than doing it like this. But that's just a bit of fun, really. So we'll see what happens. I can talk a little bit more about how I set up the SIPI map, although I won't go into too much detail. I don't know how much longer should I talk for. I can keep talking for quite.
I was just wondering, did you visit the Royal Horticultural Society website? Because they've got an online encyclopedia of plants.
I haven't actually seen that, but there's
I'm sure there must be other ones.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things, but yeah, I suppose if you wanted to get an ID, there's various online keys, and there's all sorts of sites you can go to.
I was just wondering if where the crowd was, because with these kind of things, which audience does it appeal to, kind of thing.
Well, so I'm thinking kind of community groups and things, and kind of local nature reserves and things who'd be interested. I'll give you an example of one I've done recently. I'll just find a site. So I went to what they call a BioBlitz, and it's a day where so people kind of volunteer. They go along to a nature reserve normally, and they just try and find as many species as they can in that area, and kind of just collect as much biological information as they can in one day over sort of 24 hours. So you get people going out at night to do bats, and certain different times of the day collecting different things. So and I went along to one of these recently. I didn't actually have much time, and it was a small kind of conservation trust called the Butterfly Conservation Trust, and they don't necessarily have kind of access to great maps and all the rest of it. So it was up in Stirling, and so I just made a little map of the area and put some features on, and kind of tagged them, and it's fairly basic, but I think it's just perfect for what they might want to use it for, if just to put it onto their website. So I kind of contacted them and they said they were quite interested in maybe using it on their website just to show people where it was and get a basic idea of the kind of layout. And that's there, the Western Moss Nature Reserve. So it's that kind of sort of purpose, if you know, and they'd be interested in having kind of maybe a little bit more habitat information on OpenStreetMap, so they can just manage their reserve possibly. So it's that sort of practical kind of application, just sort of small groups who need a little bit of sort of GIS, but nothing too complicated. So that's one I did recently. So that's the sort of group who might.
I did contact the Edinburgh Rangers for the different parks that are there, but I don't know if it kind of clicked with them yet, because they get access to audience survey plans, so but I just don't think it's quite got the recognition yet in the community. So this would actually be better for them, because it's something that the audience survey doesn't.
Yeah, have so much information about it, yeah.
So it's kind of a different angle, so I think they like that.
Yeah. Certainly I've spoken to like the Waters Leith Trust in Edinburgh, and they were interested in it just actually because they don't have access to ordnance survey or not in a GIS sense. So they
Is that the Waters Leith, the whole path all the way along?
Yeah, they've got like a little visitor centre there. Have you seen it on the Leith Walkway? And so they run sort of community volunteers who clear up the river and just educate people about the river and how it's used. And so
looking for otters.
Yeah, looking for otters. Yeah. So, and they just they didn't really have a good, particularly an interactive map, like a slippy map of where they were. So
I think the Waters Leith Walk has been done really well.
Yeah. So it's perfect for them if they need to guide someone around, or where do I walk from here to get to here, and they can just use that. So it's sort of that sort of application. But yeah, they might be interested in using it as more of a sort of a management tool and a bit more in-depth sort of stuff as well. So, but yeah, anyone has any ideas of maybe where this should go?
Actually, I was just thinking there was a couple of there was a video on TED about this guy who redeveloped a whole area. I think it was in Indonesia, reforested an area. So he needed to do a survey, start off with a survey and then start replanting, and it had a huge effect on that local environment. And looks like that you could start using something like that in like developing countries, just being able to figure out, to get the rough information first for reforestation. That's
certainly. I mean, I don't know what I'm sure there's lots of applications out there for it, and I think it's a great way to get community involved as well. I think that's the main advantage of it, because I suppose the other side of it is that there is a lot of commercial mapping out there, but a lot of it kind of goes to waste because it's people who are doing developed sort of planning applications and things like that. They make great maps, but it's only for that specific task of doing a planning application, and then they just get lost. And if they can be encouraged to add it to OpenStreetMap, that'd be great. So I'm sort of also looking to encourage people who are professionals, professional ecologists or professional engineers planning things, to maybe start to either use OpenStreetMap if that's applicable, or to later on sort of share it with OpenStreetMap in some form, because there's a lot of great surveying goes on, but it just never gets shared with everyone. So that's kind of the other side of it.
It would come in really helpful in the project I'm working on, in the Elder Park.
Yeah.
Because one of the things is, there's quite a lot of trees there. So it's getting people interested in the fact they're different trees. You know what I mean? That opens the park up, the identity of the park becomes, it's a hawthorn, it's a this, rather than just people just see trees. And also for Glasgow City Council in Kelvin Grove, I mean the council just come in and whack trees all over the place. They've just taken down about 20 trees around the skateboard park, and it's trees that they're a bit damaged or whatever, but they've still got 20 years of life on them. And the reckoning was we've got the budget now to do it. We don't have the budget, and that's what they're using to whack trees in Kelvin Grove. Absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. Somebody's it's been I think it's doing a great site. Open Eco Maps. Tom Chance's site is great, and he's been doing a lot of looking at trees as well. And one community group mapped all their trees, and you can do like a sort of rough approximate sum of what those trees are worth to the community. So it's kind of a strange thing how you value a tree, but there's ways of doing it. And so they worked out these trees in their community worth like £1 million. So if you were going to go along and redevelop this area, they were thinking about cutting them all down. It was like, oh well, wait a minute, you're damaging £1 million worth of trees. So, there's definitely sort of potential for communities to.
But I mean, also in Kelvin Grove, look at this kind of peace tree or something. It's just any time there's events, everybody, people just sit up in this tree. It's just a brilliant tree. Everybody congregates, so there's all these monumental trees sitting about as well that could be.
I think that's a good use of OpenStreetMaps, putting in these sort of landmark trees. Yeah, and that certainly put in a few of those sort of more distinct trees. Because you can't spend your life mapping all the trees, but it's definitely worth mapping some of the important ones. Yeah. I think I'll just have a quick look. I think that's. No, I don't want to give you a spreadsheet.
There's actually lots of these little kind of community groups around preservation of parks and stuff like that. I mean, I know that there's Friends of the Meadows in Edinburgh, or Friends of the Hermitage Park, with all the nature reserves and stuff like that. It's amazing that I don't necessarily know where they all are. It's like the first time I mapped all the allotments of Edinburgh, because I just didn't realise that they're all over the place, and they're hidden away in different places. I mean, just being able to highlight those groups is great. So.
I mean, ultimately, OpenStreetMap would be great if you could, customize it on the fly for your particular interest. Right, I'm interested in allotments, and the map will show you all the allotments and give you all the interactive stuff, or I'm interested in local nature reserves. I mean, I'm sure that's sort of starting to happen. Right? You can get that kind of a customization, and that would be great. Along those lines. But there is, because there's so many interests. I sort of call this is like the long tail of OpenStreetMap mappings, that once you've done the sort of buildings and roads, there's always sort of micro mapping to do. And I think more and more people are probably going to get interested in the sort of micro mapping side of, potentially OpenStreetMap as things develop. I don't know. That's my sort of theory. So, I think I've mentioned a few of these already, but there's just sort of things I'm going to work on. Is looking at tidying up definitions and things in the wiki, and maybe getting some of these new terms approved and sort of endorsed by the community. Because I think that's important, because I think there is question marks over what should and shouldn't go in, and how to do that.